My brother got a new car for graduation, while I got only $50 in Mockery from my stepmom. 18 is supposed to be this magical age where everything suddenly makes sense, where life hands you the keys to adulthood and says, "Good luck, kid." For some people, it does happen that way. For me, my 18th birthday gift was watching my stepmom Carol hand my stepbrother Randy the keys to a brand new Ford Mustang, while I got a worn envelope with $50 inside. You know those movies where the underdog kid finally gets his moment? Where the neglected stepchild is secretly the chosen one? Yeah, turns out my life wasn't one of those movies. At least, it sure as hell didn't feel like it on graduation day. I stood in the backyard of our suburban home, sweating in the suit that my mom had bought me for a cousin's wedding when I was 14, back before she got sick, before the cancer took her, before Dad remarried, and our house became Carol's territory. The sleeves barely reached my wrist now, and the pants showed a good inch of sock whenever I sat down. But I wore it anyway because it was the last nice thing Mom had ever bought me that wasn't just practical necessities. Everyone gathered around. Carol's voice cut through graduation party chatter. She was wearing her trademark look, expensive jeans, designer top, and that plastic smile that never quite reached her eyes. We have special gifts for our graduates. Our backyard was filled with family, friends, neighbors, and a few of my classmates whose parents were friends with Carol. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on my neck as I shuffled forward, standing awkwardly next to Randy, my stepbrother, Carol's golden child, and the living embodiment of everything I wasn't in their eyes. Randy had always been the star. New sneakers every season, driving lessons at 16, praise for breathing. Meanwhile, I was Sarah's boy, my mom's name used like it was some kind of character flaw. Like loving my mom and being loved by her had somehow made me defective. I watched as Carol handed Randy a small box with a dramatic flourish. The kind of move you'd see on one of those reality TV shows she loved so much. "For our pride and joy," she announced, her voice dripping with manufactured emotion. Randy opened it, revealing a set of keys attached to a Ford logo keychain. His eyes widened as Carol pointed to the driveway. There it sat, a brand new Mustang, candy apple red, with a massive bow on top. Holy H! Randy caught himself, remembering his grandparents were present. This is incredible. The crowd oohed and ahed as Randy sprinted to his new car, Carol following closely behind like a pageant mom relishing in reflected glory. Dad stood off to the side, smiling that weak smile he perfected since remarrying, the one that never quite committed to being genuinely happy or sad. After about 10 minutes of everyone fawning over Randy's new ride, Carol suddenly remembered there was another graduate present. Me. "Oh, and for Alex," she said, almost as an afterthought. She pulled a worn envelope from her purse and held out toward me. I could feel everyone's eyes shift in my direction, that uncomfortable silence settling over the yard. I reached for the envelope, already knowing what was inside. We played this game before. Randy gets the steak, I get the bone. Randy gets the PlayStation. I get a $15 GameStop gift card. The envelope was thin, containing a single $50 bill that looked like it had been through the wash. "You can buy yourself something decent," Carol said with a smirk that only I could see. "Maybe some clothes that actually fit." A few people chuckled. Someone's uncle made a comment about starting from the bottom and building character. I felt the ground shift beneath my feet as hot embarrassment crawled up my neck. Dad cleared his throat, staring at his shoes. "Every great success story starts somewhere small, son," he mumbled, not meeting my eyes. "Humble beginnings and all that." I nodded, because what else could I do? Make a scene? Throw the money back in Carol's face? Storm off dramatically? This was a movie, and I didn't have the luxury of righteous exits. I had exactly $237 in my bank account, no car, and community college starting in the fall. So instead, I thought about what my mom would say. Mom, who'd always been my rock and biggest supporter. Mom, who fought the cancer so bravely for 2 years, never once complaining even on her worst days. Mom, who made Dad promise to take care of me before she died when I was 15, not knowing he'd remarry so quickly, and to someone like Carol. Her voice came to me then, clear as day. You're stronger than you think, Alex. The oak that bends in the storm doesn't break. That voice was the only thing keeping me from smashing the envelope against Carol's forehead or breaking down in front of everyone. Thanks for your generosity, Carol, I said, forcing a smile. I pocketed the 50 and walked away from the circle of people, away from the Mustang, away from the pity glances and uncomfortable shuffling. Behind me, I heard Carol whisper to someone, "Finally got rid of him." She didn't bother lowering her voice enough. She never did when it came to me. I kept walking, straight through the side gate and down the street. Dad didn't call after me. Nobody did. And somewhere deep inside, I knew this was the last day I'd spend in that house. The walk to Mike's place took almost an hour. Mike was my best friend since elementary school, the kind of friend who knows exactly what you're going through without you having to say a word. His parents had always treated me like family. Real family, not the Carol version of family. "Dude, just crash here tonight," Mike said after I told him what happened. "My folks won't mind." But I knew I couldn't stay. Not for long. Mike's family had their own struggles. His dad had been laid off twice in the past year, and their house was already crowded with his 3 younger siblings. Sometimes the smallest gifts open the biggest doors. My mom used to say. I rolled a $50 bill between my fingers, wondering what door this insulting parting gift might possibly open. Right now, it felt less like a door and more like a slap in the face. That night, I scrolled through apartment listings on my phone, my stomach nodding with each price tag. Even the most depressing studios were going for $900 a month. Eventually, I found a Facebook post about someone looking for a roommate in a 3-bedroom place. $450 a month, utilities included. The catch? The room was actually a converted pantry off the kitchen, but it had a window and could fit a twin mattress. 2 days later, I moved out. Dad helped load my few boxes into his car, his movement stiff, his conversation stilted. "You don't have to do this, Alex," he said as we drove to my new place. "Carol just has a particular way of showing affection." I stared out the window, watching the neighborhoods get progressively shabbier. "Is that what you call it?" "She's trying in her way," he insisted, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Family dynamics are complicated. They're only complicated when you let them be." I replied. Mom would have been devastated to see what Dad had become. This shadow of a man who couldn't even stand up for his own son. We arrived at my new apartment building, a faded brick structure with peeling paint and a security door that looked like it had been kicked in more than once. Dad helped carry my stuff up 3 flights of stairs, making small talk about the community college I'd be attending in the fall. His voice echoed in the stairwell, bouncing off graffiti-marked walls. My new roommates were a couple guys in their 20s, Zach, who worked at a warehouse, and Devin, who bartended at night and slept most days. They barely looked up from their video game when we brought in my stuff. My room was exactly as advertised, a converted pantry with just enough space for a twin mattress on the floor, a small dresser, and a narrow path between them. The window overlooked an alley where someone had dumped a sofa. The walls were scuffed and stained with something I didn't want to identify. "It's cozy," Dad said, trying to sound optimistic. I shrugged. "It's what $50 and minimum wage can get you." Dad flinched. He reached for his wallet, but I stopped him. "Don't," I said. "I don't want Carol's money. Or yours." He looked at me for a long moment, and I thought maybe, just maybe, he might finally say something real. Something that acknowledged what had been happening for the past 3 years. Instead, he patted my shoulder awkwardly. "Call if you need anything," he said. We both knew I wouldn't. After he left, I sat on my mattress, a hand-me-down from Devin's ex-girlfriend, and listened to the sounds of my new home. The faint hiss of the ancient refrigerator, the muffled cursing from my roommates as they played their game, the distant wail of sirens that seemed to be the neighborhood soundtrack. The whole place smelled like old pizza, and the cheap-scented candles Zach's girlfriend burned to mask the even worse smells. It was a far cry from the pristine suburban home where Carol insisted on weekly professional cleaning services. I pulled out my phone and looked at the last photo I had of Mom and me together, at the zoo, a few months before she got too sick to go out. She was already thin by then, but her smile was as bright as ever. Life doesn't always give you what you want, she told me that day, but it gives you what you need to become who you're meant to be. The next morning, I started my shift at Manny's Diner, a greasy spoon about 6 blocks from my apartment. I'd been washing dishes there for almost a year, picking up shifts after school and on weekends. Manny was a gruff old guy who barked orders and complained about everything, but he paid in cash and didn't ask questions when I needed extra hours. The kitchen was sweltering, steam rising from the industrial dishwasher, my hands red and raw despite the rubber gloves. I scrubbed dried egg yolk off plates and scraped congealed gravy from serving bowls, all while dodging the servers who rushed in to dump more dirty dishes in my station. "Hey, college boy," Manny called from the grill. "You working Saturday morning?" "Yes, sir," I replied, not bothering to correct him about the college part. Community college didn't start for another 3 months, and even then, I'd only be able to take 2 classes per semester while working. "Good," he grunted. "Josephine's kid quit. Need you on prep." A promotion, sort of. Prep cook paid $1 more an hour than dishwashing, and I wouldn't go home with my shoes squelching from standing in puddles all day. Small victories. As I scrubbed a particularly stubborn pan, I thought about Randy and his Mustang. By now, he'd be cruising around town, stereo blasting, probably headed to one of those graduation parties in the hills where rich kids drank expensive booze and jumped into heated pools. But the thought didn't sting as much as I expected. Instead, I felt something else stirring, determination, maybe, or the first flickers of freedom. For the first time in 3 years, I didn't have to walk on eggshells in my own home. Didn't have to listen to Carol's constant commentary on my clothes, my grades, my future prospects, or lack thereof, according to her. By the time my shift ended at 4 p.m., my back ached and my T-shirt was soaked with sweat and dishwater. I trudged back to the apartment, stopping at the dollar store to buy a shower curtain, my contribution to the bathroom we all shared, and a can of air freshener for my closet room. The apartment was empty. Devin would be sleeping until his shift started at 8, and Zach was probably at his girlfriend's place. I took a lukewarm shower, the hot water heater was temperamental at best, and collapsed onto my mattress. The $50 bill was still in my wallet. I took it out and pinned it to the wall with a thumbtack. Reminder of where I'd started and where I refused to end up. That night, as I drifted off to sleep with the sounds of traffic and distant arguments filtering through my window, I made myself a promise. This wouldn't be my life forever. This cramped room with its peeling wallpaper and mysterious stains would be nothing but a footnote in my story. Remember when that I'd look back on and shake my head at. I didn't know how exactly I'd make it happen. Didn't have some brilliant business idea or hidden talent that would catapult me to success. All I had was my mom's recipes in a worn notebook, a high school diploma, that $50 bill mocking me from the wall, and the stubborn determination that kept me going through Mom's illness, through Carol's subtle cruelties, through Dad's betrayal by inaction. But somehow, someway, I would prove I was worth more than $50 and an afterthought at my own graduation party. I just needed a plan. Life quickly settled into a brutal routine. Up at 5 a.m., shower while Devin was still passed out from his bartending shift, gulp down whatever was cheapest at the grocery store that week, and trudge to Manny's Diner for the morning rush. My promotion to prep cook meant I spent hours chopping onions until my eyes burned, slicing tomatoes until my hands cramped, and mixing pancake batter by the gallon. Manny wasn't exactly what you'd call an encouraging boss. The man had 2 volume settings, loud and louder. Every morning he'd stomp around the kitchen with a perpetual 5 o'clock shadow, baseball cap turned backward, barking orders like a drill sergeant with heartburn. "Those home fries better be ready in 5. College boy," he'd shout, even though I'd already lined up 6 portions. Or, "That chopping sounds like you're murdering those peppers. Smaller pieces, for crying out loud." The only saving grace was that his criticism wasn't personal. He yelled at everyone equally, from the new waitress who kept mixing up orders to Hector, the line cook who'd been there for 15 years and could flip an omelet with his eyes closed. The kitchen was always a symphony of chaos. Sizzling grills, clattering plates, shouted orders, and the constant hum of the industrial dishwasher. The air was thick with grease that settled on your skin and clothes, becoming a second cologne you couldn't wash off no matter how hard you scrubbed. My hands were constantly raw from handling cleaning chemicals and hot water. My feet ached from standing on the hard tile floor, and I had at least one new burn mark each week. But there was something comforting in the predictability of it all. The rush of tickets during breakfast, the lull around 2 p.m., the steady stream of regulars who ordered the same things day after day. It was nothing like home or what had once been home, where Carol's moods could shift like weather in April, and Dad's spine would dissolve a little more each day. Every night after my shift ended, I'd drag myself back to the apartment, muscles aching, smelling like a deep fryer. Devin would usually be heading out for his bartending gig, while Zach would be sprawled on our ancient couch, playing video games or hanging out with his girlfriend Tara. Diner boy returns. Zach would call out, not bothering to look away from the TV screen. There's pizza in the fridge if you want some. The pizza was usually cold and half-eaten, but I was too exhausted to care. I'd grab a slice, retreat to my pantry room, and collapse onto my mattress, scrolling through my phone until my eyes started to close. But not every night. 3 nights a week, I'd force myself to shower off the diner smell, set my old laptop on a stack of books, and fire up the webcam. Mom had taught me to cook when I was just a kid. Nothing fancy, just honest, delicious food that made people feel at home. Her apple pie had won the county fair 3 years running, and her beef stew could make you forget every problem you had, at least while you were eating it. After she died, I discovered her recipe notebook tucked in the kitchen drawer, a simple spiral-bound thing filled with her neat handwriting, little notes in the margins, and occasional splatters of vanilla extract or tomato sauce. I'd smuggled out when I left, knowing Carol would probably toss it in the trash during one of her decluttering frenzies. My YouTube channel, Mom's Kitchen Memories, had started as therapy more than anything else, a way to feel close to Mom again, to hear her voice in my head guiding my hands as I recreated her recipes. I wasn't expecting much, maybe a few views from bored insomniacs or algorithm strays. But something unexpected happened. People actually started watching. Not millions or anything crazy, but a couple hundred views per video. Then comments started appearing. Made this mac and cheese for my kids, and they inhaled it. First time they didn't ask for the box stuff. Your mom's chicken soup actually tastes like my grandma's. I've been trying to recreate that taste for years. This guy cooks better than half the celebrity chefs out there. No pretentious BS, just good food. The comments kept me going on nights when the apartment felt too small, too hopeless. When I look at my bank account and see that despite working nearly 40 hours a week, I was barely treading water. When I'd spot Randy's Mustang cruising downtown, bass thumping, a reminder of everything I didn't have. My subscriber count slowly climbed. 500, then 1,000, then 2,500. A tiny audience by YouTube standards. But every new subscriber felt like one more person connecting with Mom's legacy. One more person who saw value in what I was creating. There was just one problem. A recurring comment that kept appearing under almost every video. Love the recipes, but dude, your apartment looks like a serial killer's hideout. They weren't wrong. My filming setup consisted of balancing my laptop on top of a stack of books on the kitchen counter. The walls behind me were stained and peeling, with mysterious patches that looked suspiciously like someone had punched holes and filled them with toothpaste instead of spackle. The lighting was a single overhead bulb that cast harsh shadows and made every dish look like it was being served in a prison cafeteria. I tried everything I could think of to improve the backdrop, taped up some plain paper behind me, shifted angles to show less of the room, even tried filming at night, so the darkness would hide the worst parts. Nothing worked. My food might have been homey and inviting, but my kitchen looked like the before segment of an extreme makeover show, the part where the designers wear hazmat suits and make jokes about needing tetanus shots. One Wednesday morning in June, about a month after graduation, I was prepping a mountain of green peppers when Manny slid a newspaper across the cutting board. "You seen this, college boy? Yard sales this weekend. My wife says there's a big one over on Maple Avenue. Rich folk getting rid of stuff. You said you needed furniture, right?" I nodded. surprised that Manny had remembered our brief conversation from days earlier. Beneath his gruff exterior, the man occasionally showed flickers of something almost like concern. "I'll check it out." "Thanks, Manny." He grunted, already moving on to yell at Hector about the bacon being too crispy. That Saturday, I had a rare day off. I woke up late, savoring the luxury of not having to be anywhere or do anything for anyone else. As I sipped a cup of instant coffee, I remembered the yard sale Manny had mentioned. The $50 bill was still tacked to my wall, my bitter trophy, my reminder. I stared at it, thinking about what Mom would do. She'd been the queen of yard sales and thrift stores, able to sniff out treasures among junk like a bloodhound. "Retailers for suckers," she'd say with a wink, holding up some perfect cast iron pan she'd score for $3. Maybe, just maybe, I could find something to make my videos look better. A backdrop, some decent lighting, anything to make my dingy kitchen less distracting. The yard sale on Maple Avenue was exactly what you'd expect in the wealthy part town. Upscale cast-off spread across manicured lawns. Priced 3 times what they go for in my neighborhood. I wandered past designer clothes with tags still attached, exercise equipment that had clearly never been used, and enough scented candles to open a small shop. After half an hour of browsing overpriced junk, I was ready to call it quits when I spotted an elderly woman setting up a small table at the end of the block. Unlike the other sellers with their carefully arranged displays, she seemed to be simply unloading a car full of random items. Old books, a tarnished tea set, framed pictures with faded photos. Something about her reminded me of Mom, not in appearance, but in the careful way she handled each item, as if they all had stories attached. "Just cleaning out my Harold's things," she explained when she caught me looking. "He passed last winter. Kept everything, that man. Never met a garage sale he didn't like." I nodded sympathetically, scanning the assortment of items. Typical garage sale fodder, nothing special. Until she pulled out a large, dusty rectangle wrapped in an old bedsheet. Harold found this in someone's trash years ago. Always said it reminded him of a sneeze. She laughed, a warm sound that crinkled the corners of her eyes. Never had anywhere to hang it, but he wouldn't let me throw it away. Said it might be worth something someday. She unwrapped the sheet, revealing a large canvas splattered with what looked like random streaks of paint, blues, reds, and browns thrown across the surface in chaotic patterns. It wasn't beautiful, exactly, but something about it caught my eye. Maybe it was the energy of the paint strokes, or the way the colors seemed to move when you looked at them too long. "Not really my style," the woman said, "but maybe you want it for your place? Young people like weird art these days, don't they?" I laughed. My place could definitely use something on the walls. $50 and it's yours, she said. I froze. $50. The exact amount in my pocket. The exact amount Carol had tossed at me like table scraps. "I don't know. That's a bit steep for me right now." I hedged, though something in my gut was telling me to take it. The woman's face softened. "My medication isn't getting any cheaper, and Herald Insurance only covers so much. But it's just taking up space in my garage." I hesitated, fingering the worn bill in my pocket. $50 was a lot when you were making barely above minimum wage. It was groceries for a week or half my phone bill. But then I thought about my YouTube channel, about the comments mentioning my grim backdrop, about how this random splash of color might actually make my videos look more intentional, less depressing. "I'll take it," I said, handing over Carol's $50. The symmetry wasn't lost on me, turning her dismissive gift into something that might actually help me move forward. The woman carefully wrapped the canvas back in the bedsheet. "Harold would be happy it's going somewhere it'll be appreciated." I tucked the unwieldy package under my arm, wondering how I'd get home on the bus. "I hope so. I'm Alex, by the way." "Margaret," she replied with a smile. "But everyone calls me Marge." Getting a 5-foot canvas home on public transportation turned out to be exactly as awkward as you'd expect. I got plenty of side eyes from other passengers as I maneuvered the bulky package through the narrow bus aisle, accidentally bonking a few people along the way. Back at the apartment, Zach raised an eyebrow as I struggled to the door with my find. Please tell me you didn't spend actual money on whatever that is, he said. I ignored him, carrying the canvas to my room. The space was so small that the only place to prop it was against the wall opposite my mattress, where it took up almost the entire wall. Unwrapped from the bedsheet, the painting looked even stranger in my tiny room, like a window into some chaotic, colorful dimension that had accidentally opened in the middle of my drab living space. I tilted my head, studying the seemingly random splatters and drips. Is this even right side up? I wondered aloud, turning it different ways. Guess it doesn't really matter. But there was something oddly satisfying about it. The splashes of color made my plain, white walls seem intentional rather than neglected, like I'd chosen minimalism to highlight the artwork, not because I couldn't afford decorations. That night, I set up to film a new recipe video, Mom's famous apple pie with the cinnamon crust. I positioned my laptop so the painting would be visible in the background, a splash of color behind me as I worked. As I mixed the dough, explaining Mom's trick of using ice-cold butter and a splash of apple cider vinegar for flakiness, I felt a strange sense of rightness. Like Mom would approve of this odd painting keeping me company as I shared her recipes with the world. She always said food should feed your eyes before it feeds your stomach. I told the camera, rolling out the dough, presentation matters, even when you're just cooking for yourself. I uploaded the video before going to bed, not expecting much. Maybe a few comments about the weird new art, but nothing major. The next morning, I checked my phone bleary-eyed before heading to my shift at the diner. The notification count made me do a double take. My video had more views overnight than my previous 3 combined. The comments section was buzzing. Whoa, is that a Pollock behind you? Dude, if that painting is real, you might be sitting on a gold mine. That apple pie looks amazing, but I'm distracted by what looks like a Jackson Pollock casually hanging in your apartment. I stare at my phone, baffled. Jackson Pollock? The name sounded vaguely familiar from some art class I'd half paid attention to in high school. I quickly Googled him, and my heart skipped a beat as images loaded on my screen. Splattered paint, chaotic patterns. Colors dripped and flung across canvases in ways that looked random but somehow weren't. Just like my $50 yard sale find. No way. I muttered, that's impossible. I scrolled through more images, comparing them to my painting. The style was similar, eerily so, but there was no way I'd accidentally bought a painting worth. I gulped as I saw the auction prices for Pollock's work. Millions. Tens of millions. Get a grip, Alex. I told myself. Rich people don't throw away multi-million-dollar paintings. And they definitely don't end up at yard sales for $50. Still, a tiny spark of hope flickered in my chest. What if Harold really had found something valuable in someone's trash? What if this random act of kindness toward an old woman had accidentally changed my life? I almost called out sick from work. The urge to investigate further was so strong. But I couldn't afford to lose the hours, so I forced myself to go in, chopping vegetables and prepping pancake batter on autopilot while my mind raced. After my shift, I filmed another quick video, deliberately positioning myself so the painting was more visible. I didn't mention the comments about Pollock, just carried on making Mom's signature meatloaf as if nothing was different. The response was immediate. More comments about the painting, more questions, more viewers. One comment in particular caught my eye. If you think that might be authentic, don't say anything to anyone. Art authentication is serious business. DM me if you want advice. The user had a profile picture of an older man with silver hair and glasses. His bio said he was a retired art history professor. I hesitated, then sent a message. It's probably nothing, I wrote. Just something I picked up at a yard sale. But people seem to think it looks like a Pollock. His response came minutes later. Take close-up photos of the corners, any signatures in the back of the canvas. Don't get your hopes up, but don't dismiss it either. 99% of found masterpieces are fakes or misattributions, but that other 1% does happen. That night, I lay on my mattress, staring at the painting in the dim light filtering through my small window. The colors seemed to shift and move, telling stories I couldn't quite understand. Was it truly just random splashes, or was there intention behind each drip and streak? I thought about the comments, about the professor's message, about the absurd possibility that this thrift store cast-off could be something valuable. The rational part of my brain said it was impossible. The dreamer in me, the part that still believed in Mom's assurance that good things happen when you least expect them, wondered if this could be my break. Either way, that painting had already changed something for me. My YouTube channel was getting more attention. People were engaging. And for the first time since moving into this dismal apartment, I felt a spark of excitement about what tomorrow might bring. I fell asleep watching the patterns shift in the moonlight, dreaming of paint splatters that turned into constellations, of Mom smiling as she pointed to stars that spelled out keep going, of Carol's face when she realized her $50 had bought something priceless. Sometimes, trash really is treasure. You just have to be the right person to see it. The comments about Pollock kept coming with each new video I posted. My channel was suddenly getting more traffic than ever. Not because of my cooking, but because people were fascinated by the painting in the background. The art crowd had discovered my little cooking show, and they had opinions. Over breakfast one morning, stale cereal with the last drops of milk, I scrolled through the latest batch of comments. That's definitely Pollock's energy technique from his middle period. Look at the layering and that characteristic drip pattern in the corner. Classic JP. Either this guy is a priceless masterpiece or the best knockoff I've ever seen. My subscribers had nearly doubled in a week. Normally, that would have been cause for celebration, but it fell hollow. They weren't there for Mom's recipes or my cooking. They were art rubberneckers, waiting to see if some random kid in a cramped apartment had stumbled onto a fortune. I decided to educate myself. During my lunch break at the diner, I Googled Jackson Pollock on my phone, diving deeper than my initial search. The more I read, the more my pulse quickened. Pollock was an American abstract expressionist painter, famous for his drip technique. He died in 1956 in a car crash. His paintings regularly sold for millions. One had gone for $140 million in 2006. After my shift, I headed to the public library. The elderly librarian raised an eyebrow when I asked for books on Pollock, but directed me to the art section without comment. For 2 hours, I pored over glossy art books, comparing images to the mental picture of my painting. The style was remarkably similar. The chaotic energy, the layering of paint, the particular way colors seemed to dance across the canvas. One book had close-up details of Pollock's technique, showing how he built layers of drips and splatters. My heart hammered against my ribs. Could it actually be real? The rational part of my brain kept interrupting with warnings. People don't just find priceless paintings at yard sales. This kind of luck doesn't happen to guys like me. If it seems too good to be true, it probably is. But another voice, one that sounded suspiciously like Mom's, whispered, "But what if it is real? What if this is your break?" I snapped photos of several pages for comparison, earning a disapproving look from the librarian. On my way out, I noticed a flyer for an art lecture at the local community college. The speaker was Dr. William Barrett, Professor Emeritus of Art History at the State University. The topic was American Expressionism, Beyond the Canvas. Sometimes, timing really is everything. The lecture hall was nearly empty, just a handful of elderly people, a few bored-looking students clearly there for extra credit, and me, the sweaty guy in the back row who kept nervously checking his phone. Dr. Barrett was exactly what you'd imagine when someone says art professor. Silver hair and a neat ponytail, wire-rimmed glasses, corduroy jacket with elbow patches. His voice had that measured cadence of someone who'd spent decades sharing knowledge with indifferent undergrads. I stayed after the lecture, waiting until the small crowd of questioners had dispersed. Dr. Barrett was packing up his presentation materials when I approached. "Excuse me, Professor. I have a question about Jackson Pollock." He looked up, eyebrows raised. "Pollock? We barely touched on him tonight." I swallowed hard. "I know. It's more of a specific question. About authentication." His expression shifted from mild disinterest to sharp focus. "Authentication? Now that's not a topic the average art enthusiast brings up." I explained my situation, the yard sale, the painting, the YouTube comments, trying to sound casual, as if we were discussing the weather and not the possibility of me owning something worth millions. Dr. Barrett listened, his expression growing increasingly skeptical. When I finished, he sighed, removing his glasses to polish them with a handkerchief. "Young man, do you know how many found Pollocks are reported every year? Hundreds. Do you know how many are authentic? Practically none." He replaced his glasses, fixing me with a stern look. Pollock knockoffs are everywhere. Some are deliberate forgeries. Others are enthusiastic amateurs trying to imitate his style. Either way, the odds of you finding an authentic Pollock at a yard sale for $50 are, frankly, astronomical. My hopes deflated, like a punctured soufflé. I should have known better. However, he continued, surprising me, astronomical doesn't mean impossible. Art history is full of incredible discoveries in unlikely places. A Caravaggio found in an attic in France. A Van Gogh identified after decades in a Norwegian attic. He wrote something on the back of a business card and handed it to me. Take photos, high resolution, every angle, including the back of the canvas. Email them to me. I doubt it's authentic, but I'm curious enough to look. I thanked him, trying not to sound as desperate as I felt. That night, I took dozens of photos of the painting, using Zach's girlfriend's DSLR camera that she used for her fashion blog. The canvas had no signature I could find, but the back had some stained labels and what looked like inventory numbers partially obscured by dirt and age. I sent the photos to Dr. Barrett, then lay awake staring at the painting, trying to see what experts might see. Was that splash of blue significant? Did the way the red interacted with the black indicate anything special? Or was I just a fool with an overpriced knockoff and an overactive imagination? 3 days passed with no word from Dr. Barrett. I began to accept that my brief dream of an unexpected fortune was just that, a dream. I went back to my routine. Prep cook by day, YouTube chef by night, try to ignore the painting that now seemed to mock me from my wall. Then, on the 4th day, my phone rang with an unknown number. "Is this Alex?" The voice was clipped professional. "Yes." "This is William Barrett. We need to meet. In person. Today, if possible." The coffee shop Dr. Barrett suggested was in the upscale part town, the kind of place where a regular coffee cost $5 and the pastries had French names I couldn't pronounce. I arrived early, nursing the cheapest drink on the menu, still painful at $3.75, and trying not to look as out of place as I felt. Dr. Barrett arrived precisely on time, accompanied by a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and sharper cheekbones. "Alex, this is Catherine Winters, from Hartwell Auction House. I consulted with her about your situation." Ms. Winters didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Dr. Barrett shared your photos with me. The piece shows genuine promise. The composition, the paint application technique, even the aging patterns, they're consistent with Pollock's work from around 1948 to 1950. My mouth went dry. So it could be real? Could be, but photos only tell us so much. We need to conduct proper testing, microscopic paint analysis, canvas dating, provenance research. Dr. Barrett leaned forward. "Alex, if, and I stress if this is authentic, we're talking about a significant find, historically significant. And yes, financially significant." I felt dizzy, like the air in the cafe had suddenly thinned. How significant? Ms. Winters' expression remained professionally neutral. Mid-period Pollocks in good condition have sold for anywhere from $20 to $70 million at auction in recent years. The room seemed to tilt sideways. $20 to $70 million. For something I'd bought with Carol's $50. The universe had a weird sense of humor. What's the next step? I managed, proud that my voice didn't crack. "We'll need to take the painting for testing," Ms. Winters replied. "Our facility has equipment necessary for preliminary authentication. If those results are promising, we move to more extensive verification." "How much does testing cost?" I asked, mentally calculating how many diner shifts it would take to afford whatever astronomical sum they were about to name. They exchanged a look. Dr. Barrett cleared his throat. "Normally quite a lot, But Catherine has agreed to waive the initial fees in exchange for exclusive rights to auction the piece if it proves authentic. We'd take our standard commission, of course, Ms. Winters added. But Hartwell has the connections to get maximum value for a find like this. I nodded slowly, my mind racing. This was happening too fast. Yesterday, I was just a guy with a weird painting. Today, I was discussing auction houses and art authentication with people who casually threw around terms like provenance and mid-period. I need some time to think, I said, surprised at myself. A week ago, I would have jumped at any chance at easy money. But something held me back. Caution, maybe, or the memory of Mom saying, "Never sign anything without reading it twice." Ms. Winters looked surprised, but recovered quickly. Of course. Here's our standard contract for your review. We'd need your answer by Friday. As they left, Dr. Barrett paused. Alex, whatever happens, this is an extraordinary opportunity. But remember, 99% of these stories don't have happy endings. Prepare yourself for disappointment. That night, I read the contract 3 times, Googling every term I didn't understand. It seemed fair enough. They'd authenticate the painting, and if real, auction it for a commission. But the enormity of what might be happening kept hitting me in waves. I could pay for college, buy a decent car, get an apartment where the shower had consistent water pressure. Hell, I could buy a house, houses plural. I could quit the diner and focus on cooking full-time. It was too much to process alone. I needed a second opinion from someone who wasn't trying to get their hands on my potential gold mine. The next morning, I called Mike, my old friend from high school. "Dude, that's insane," he exclaimed after I explained everything. "You're telling me you might be sitting on millions because of some random yard sale find?" "Maybe, probably not. But maybe. What does the contract say about what happens if it's fake?" I frowned. Actually, it doesn't really specify. Red flag, man. You should get a lawyer to look at this. Lawyers cost money. Money I didn't have. But Mike's dad had a poker buddy who was an attorney. One phone call and a promise of homemade apple pie later. I had an appointment with Mr. Goldstein, a semi-retired lawyer who specialized in contract law. Mr. Goldstein's office was above a dry cleaner's, with a window unit air conditioner that rattled like it was haunted. He read the contract in silence, occasionally making notes with a fountain pen. "It's not terrible," he finally said, "but there are some concerning vagaries. No clear timeline for authentication. No specification about what happens if they determine it's not authentic. Do you get the painting back? What condition will it be in?" He helped me draft a counterproposal with clearer terms, a specific timeline, and explicit language about the painting's return if it proved inauthentic. When I tried to pay him, he waved me off. Mike's dad saved my behind in our last poker game. Consider us even. But if that painting turns out to be real, I expect an invitation to the celebration party. I signed the revised contract the next day. Ms. Winters didn't seem thrilled with the changes, but agreed readily enough, which made me glad I'd sought legal advice. 2 men in white gloves came to collect the painting, treating it with a reverence usually reserved for religious artifacts. They placed it in a custom crate, had me sign forms verifying the transfer, and just like that, it was gone. My room looked emptier than ever without the splash of color on the wall. I went back to work, back to filming recipes in my depressing kitchen, trying not to think about the test being conducted on my $50 find. A week passed, then another. I checked my email obsessively, jumped every time my phone rang. Nothing. Finally, after nearly 3 weeks of silence, Ms. Winters called. "We need you to come to the auction house. Today, if possible." Her voice gave nothing away. I asked for the afternoon off, earning a scowl from Manny, and took the bus across town to the Hartwell Auction House, a stately building with columns and security guards who eyed my diner clothes with barely concealed disdain. Ms. Winters met me in a conference room where Dr. Barrett was already waiting. On the table was a thick folder stamped, "Confidential." "Please, sit down," she said. I perched on the edge of a leather chair worth more than my entire wardrobe. Dr. Barrett looked like he hadn't slept in days, excited and exhausted in equal measure. "Alex, we've completed our preliminary testing." My heart pounded so loudly I was sure they could hear it. And Ms. Winters slid the folder toward me. Congratulations. You own an authenticated Jackson Pollock. The room spun. I gripped the armrest of the chair, certain I was dreaming. The canvas dates to the right period, Dr. Barrett explained, his academic demeanor giving way to genuine excitement. The paint composition matches samples from known Pollocks. X-ray analysis shows the layering technique consistent with his work, and we found a partial fingerprint in the paint that matches prints from his studio. There's more, Ms. Winters added. We believe this is one of the lost Pollocks from the Spring series, works rumored to exist but never cataloged. The art world has speculated about them for decades. I stared at them, waiting for the punchline, for someone to leap out with camera crew and tell me I was being punked. But they kept talking about provenance theories, market valuations, auction strategies. Given the historical significance in the current market, we're setting a preliminary auction estimate of $45 to $55 million. $50 million. From a $50 yard sale purchase. 1,000 times return on investment. All because Carol thought $50 was an appropriate graduation gift for her stepson. I remembered Mom's voice. Happiness comes when you least expect it. But this wasn't just happiness. This was life-changing, generation-defining wealth. The kind of money that rewrites futures. A slightly hysterical laugh bubbled up from my chest. My stepmom gave me $50 for graduation, and I accidentally became a millionaire. Maybe I should call and thank her. Ms. Winters, not recognizing the joke, nodded politely. Family support is always important in times of change. Dr. Barrett, more perceptive, gave me a knowing look. Fortune finds us in the strangest places, doesn't it? Back in my apartment, I paced a small space, unable to sit still. $50 million. The number was incomprehensible. I could buy anything, go anywhere, do anything. But as the initial shock faded, one thought kept returning. Marge, the elderly woman who'd sold me the painting for $50, her husband Harold's trash heap treasure. She needed money for medication. She let the painting go because she had no idea of its value. Could I really cash in on her ignorance? Take tens of millions while she struggled to pay medical bills? No, Mom had raised me better than that. The next morning, I called Ms. Winters. Before we go any further, I need to find someone. The woman who sold me the painting. That's unusual, she replied, clearly confused. Is there a specific reason? She deserves to know, and she deserves a share. The line went quiet for so long, I thought we'd been disconnected. Finally, Ms. Winters spoke, her voice softer than I'd heard before. That's very honorable, Alex. We can help find her. It took 3 days of calls and a private investigator, paid for by the auction house as a client service. But they found her, Margaret Wilson, 76, living in a modest ranch house about 40 minutes outside town. The morning I was scheduled to visit her, I stood in front of my cracked bathroom mirror, trying to look like someone who wasn't about to deliver life-changing news. The face that stared back looked the same as always, just a normal guy with dark circles under his eyes from too many early morning shifts. Not someone who owned a $50 million painting. Not yet. I took the bus, then a regional transit connection, finally walking the last half mile to Marge's house. It was a small place with neatly trimmed hedges and a bird feeder in the front yard. Wind chimes tinkled softly from the porch. Standing at her door, folder of authentication documents and photos in hand, I felt something I hadn't expected, nervousness, yes, but also a strange sense of rightness. This moment, somehow, was exactly where I was supposed to be. I pressed the doorbell and heard it chime inside, followed by slow footsteps. Ready or not, this was it. The door swung open, revealing Marge in a floral housecoat, her silver hair neatly pinned back. Recognition flickered across her face immediately. "You're the young man who bought Harold's painting," she said, surprise lifting her eyebrows. I nodded, clutching my folder of documents like a lifeline. "I am. I'm Alex. I was hoping we could talk for a few minutes about that painting." Her expression shifted to concern. Is something wrong with it? Did it fall apart? She stepped back, gesturing me inside. Come in, come in." I just made cinnamon rolls. The scent of cinnamon and sugar enveloped me as I stepped into her home. The place was modest but immaculate, filled with the kind of comfortable furniture that invites you to sit and stay a while. Photos lined the walls. A younger Marge with a sturdy-looking man, I assumed was Harold. Children at various ages, grandchildren with gap-toothed smiles. No, nothing's wrong with the painting, I assured her as she guided me to a kitchen table already set with flowered plates and mismatched mugs. Actually, it's pretty much the opposite of wrong. She placed a still warm cinnamon roll on a plate before me, then sat across the table, her hands folded expectantly. You're being mysterious, young man. I took a deep breath, opened my folder, and laid out the authentication report with its official letterhead. The painting you sold me for $50? It's a genuine Jackson Pollock. It's worth approximately $50 million. Marge stared at me, unblinking. For so long I worried I'd given her a stroke. Then her hand flew to her chest. Sweet Jesus, she whispered. I thought it was just Harold's trash find. I pushed the documents toward her, the authentication certificates, the preliminary auction estimates, everything the auction house had given me. It's real, all of it. I came because it didn't feel right to keep this information to myself. You should know what you had. Marge's eyes filled with tears. Harold always said it might be worth something someday. I thought he was just being Harold. He never could throw anything away. A brittle laugh escaped her. $50 million? For that splattered mess. I nodded, unable to suppress a smile at her description, which matched my own initial reaction. That's why I'm here. I don't think it's fair for me to profit from this when you had no idea what you were selling. I want to split the proceeds with you. Her eyes widened further, tears now spilling onto her cheeks. You do that? Why? Before I could answer, the front door opened and a male voice called out, Mom, your car's making that noise again. I think it's A man in his 40s with salt and pepper hair stopped short in the doorway, taking in the scene. His mother crying, a stranger at her table, documents spread between them. What's going on? His voice had the protective edge of a son who'd appointed himself his elderly mother's guardian. Marge wiped her eyes. Tom, this is Alex. He bought Harold's painting, the one with the paint splatters. Tom's confusion was evident as he stepped into the kitchen, eyeing me suspiciously. And he's making you cry because... It's a Pollock, Tommy. A real one. Worth millions. Tom's expression shifted from suspicion to disbelief. Mom, that's ridiculous. Some kind of scam. He turned to me, eyes narrowing. What are you trying to pull here? I'd anticipated skepticism. Anyone would be suspicious of a stranger bringing news of sudden millions. I slid the official authentication report toward him. It's been verified by Hartwell Auction House and independent experts. The painting's real. Tom scanned the documents, his frown deepening. And you're here because I want to split the auction proceeds with your mother. It's the right thing to do. Tom's eyebrows shot up. Split? As in, you get half of $50 million for a painting you paid $50 for? That's your idea fair. I felt heat rising in my face. I never said 50-50. I just meant... Marge interrupted, her voice surprisingly firm. Thomas Andrew Wilson. This young man didn't have to come here at all. He could have taken that money and disappeared without a word. Tom had the grace to look slightly abashed, but a suspicion remained. Why didn't you? Most people would have. It was a fair question. One I'd asked myself during the bus ride here. My mom raised me better than that. I said, simply, she always said our character is defined by what we do when no one's watching. Tom studied me for a long moment, as if trying to see through some hidden agenda. Finally, his posture relaxed slightly. Well, we should have a lawyer review everything before any decisions are made. Just then, the door opened again, and a young woman entered, carrying grocery bags. Dad! They were out of the cereal Grandma likes, so She stopped, noticing me. Oh, hello. She was about my age, with dark hair pulled into a messy bun, wearing jeans and a faded concert t-shirt. Her smile was immediate and genuine, the kind that creates an instant connection. "Lily, this is Alex," Marge said, "the one who bought Grandpa's painting." Lily set down her groceries, looking between us curiously. "The splatter painting? Did you come show Grandma how you displayed it or something?" Tom shook his head. "Apparently. It's a genuine Pollock worth millions, and this young man wants to share the money with Mom." Lily's eyes widened, darting between her father and grandmother before settling on me. "Seriously? That's wow." Her smile did something strange to my ability to form coherent sentences. "Yeah, it's pretty wow. I managed lamely." What followed was hours of discussion around Marge's kitchen table. Tom called his lawyer friend, who arrived with a notepad full of questions. Lily made coffee, then sandwiches when we realized it was past lunchtime. Marge told stories about Harold and his yard sale treasures, most worthless, but occasionally valuable enough to pay a bill or fix the car. "He had an eye," she said fondly. "Not always a practical eye, but an eye nonetheless." As the afternoon wore on, Tom's skepticism gradually gave way to cautious excitement. The lawyer, a pragmatic woman named Joyce, confirmed that the documentation appeared legitimate. "Why not just sell it yourself?" Tom asked eventually, the question that had clearly been bothering him. Why involve Mom at all? I considered how to explain. Because I know what it's like to be taken advantage of, to have something valuable taken from you without fair compensation. I thought of Carol and her dismissive $50 gift, of Dad standing by while I was pushed out. I wouldn't do that to someone else. Marge reached across the table and patted my hand, her eyes warm. "You remind me of Harold, honest to a fault." She turned to her son. "This young man is offering to share a fortune he legally owns outright. Instead of questioning his motives, maybe say, 'Thank you.'" Tom had the good grace to look embarrassed. "You're right, Mom. Thank you, Alex. This is incredibly generous." Lily smiled at me over a coffee cup. Super generous. And kind of amazing. We eventually settled on terms everyone felt good about. The painting would be auctioned as planned. We would split the proceeds evenly, 50% for Marge and 50% for me. It felt like the fairest solution, acknowledging both her unknowing contribution and my initiative in discovering its value. The auction house would handle all the paperwork, taxes, and logistics. As the lawyer finalized notes, Lily leaned toward me. "So, what are you going to do with your share? Buy a mansion? A yacht? Start a business?" I hadn't thought that far ahead. The idea of millions was still abstract, unreal. But one image came immediately to mind. A restaurant, I think. Nothing fancy. Just good food, my mom's recipes. Her eyes lit up. "You cook?" "I try. I have a small YouTube channel. Nothing special, just..." "Wait!" Her eyes widened. "Mom's kitchen memories? That's you." My surprise must have shown on my face because she laughed. "I've been watching your channel for months. Your mom's apple pie recipe is amazing. I made it for Thanksgiving and everyone freaked out. The coincidence seemed impossible, yet somehow perfectly fitting. Small world. I managed..." "The smallest," she agreed. I never connected that the guy with the maybe Pollock in his videos was the same one who bought Grandpa's painting. We talked about cooking, about my plans for future videos, about her job teaching music at the local elementary school. The lawyer and Tom discussed logistics in the background, but Lily and I existed in our own bubble connection. As evening approached, I reluctantly prepared to leave, the complicated bus route home looming ahead of me. "I'll drive you," Lily offered immediately. "It's getting late for public transit." In her car, a sensible Honda with a back seat full of sheet music and children's instruments, she asked the question I've been expecting all day. "So, how did you end up with that painting in the first place? $50 isn't nothing when you're young and on your own." I hesitated, then told her everything. About Mom's death, about Carol and Randy, about the $50 graduation gift that felt like a final insult, about moving into an apartment barely bigger than a closet, about trying to make something of myself despite everything. Lily listened without interruption, her expression shifting from sympathy to outrage to admiration. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Life has a weird way of balancing scales, doesn't it?" She finally said. "Your stepmom's mean gesture turned into the best thing that ever happened to you. And to your grandmother," I added. Over the next few weeks, as the auction preparations continued, I found myself at Marge's house more and more often. Sunday dinners became a tradition. Lily and I would cook together in Marge's kitchen, testing Mom's recipes, creating new variations. Tom, initially wary, warmed to me after discovering we shared an obsession with the same baseball team. They became the family I'd lost when Mom died, supportive, genuine, kind. Marge fussed over how thin I was, sending me home with leftovers. Tom offered advice about investments and taxes, things I'd need to know once the money came in. And Lily became something else entirely. A friend, certainly, but increasingly more. The auction, when it finally happened, exceeded everyone's expectations. The art world went wild for the lost Pollock, with museums and private collectors in a bidding war that made international news. When the gavel fell at $55 million, I sat in stunned silence, Lily's hand gripped tightly in mine. The numbers were impossible to comprehend. After the auction house's commission of 10% in hefty capital gains taxes, our actual take-home would be significantly less, about $21 million each. Still, it was a life-changing sum. From $50 to $21 million, a return that would make Wall Street brokers weep with envy. I could buy a whole dealership of Mustangs and park them all in Carol's driveway, I joked to Lily later that night, as we celebrated with champagne in a fancy hotel restaurant. My first taste of the luxury my new wealth could provide. She laughed, clinking her glass against mine. "Petty, I like it, but something tells me you have better plans for that money." I did. Plans that crystallized over weeks of conversations with the Wilsons, of cooking in Marge's kitchen, of reconnecting with the joy Mom had always found in feeding people she loved. 6 months later, Sarah's Table opened its doors in a renovated historic building downtown. The restaurant was everything I dreamed, warm, welcoming, with recipes straight from Mom's notebook and a few new ones Lily and I had created together. Tom, who'd owned several successful restaurants before semi-retiring, provided invaluable guidance. Marge supplied endless encouragement and taste-testing services. We kept prices reasonable, focused on comfort food made with care, and hired staff who needed second chances, including Devin, my former roommate, as bar manager. My YouTube channel, now professionally produced, featured behind-the-scenes looks at the restaurant and cooking tutorials that had millions of views. Lily quit her teaching job to manage the restaurant's business side and start a music program for neighborhood kids in our private event space. Our relationship had blossomed from friendship to something much deeper, built on shared values and mutual respect. She understood my drive to honor Mom's memory, and I supported her passion for bringing music to children who couldn't afford lessons. Life had transformed so completely from that humiliating graduation day that sometimes it felt like I was living someone else's story. I'd moved into a comfortable apartment with actual rooms and bought a reliable car, not a Mustang. I had nothing to prove. The person I was on graduation day wouldn't recognize me now. The restaurant quickly became a local favorite, with lines out the door on weekends and glowing reviews in regional publications. Sarah's Table wasn't fancy or pretentious, just honest food served with care, exactly as Mom would have wanted. I was wiping down the front counter one busy Saturday afternoon, surveying our packed dining room with quiet satisfaction, when the front door chimed. I glanced up automatically, the greeting for new customers already forming on my lips. The words died in my throat. Standing in the doorway, looking uncomfortable in a space where they clearly fell out of place, were Dad and Carol. They hadn't seen me yet. They were too busy taking in the rustic decor, the blackboard menu, and the warm, inviting atmosphere of the place. Carol's nose wrinkled slightly, that familiar expression of finding something not quite up to her standards. Dad looked thinner, grayer, the stoop in his shoulders more pronounced than I remembered. For a brief, cowardly moment, I considered ducking into the kitchen, hiding until they left. But Mom's voice seemed to whisper in my ear, "You're stronger than you think, Alex." The oak that bends in the storm doesn't break. I straightened my shoulders and stayed put behind the counter, watching as one of our waitstaff approached to seat them. They still hadn't noticed me, but they would soon enough. The Saturday lunch rush at Sarah's table was in full swing. The dining room hummed with conversation and the clinking of silverware against plates. The air was rich with the scent of fresh-baked bread and my mom's signature apple pie, the very recipe that had launched my YouTube channel all those months ago. I watched from behind the counter as Rachel, our most experienced server, led Dad and Carol to a table by the window. Carol was overdressed as usual. Designer purse. Too much jewelry for lunch. That look of someone perpetually evaluating their surroundings. Dad seemed smaller somehow. His shoulders hunched forward in that posture he developed during his years of avoiding conflict with his second wife. They settled into their seats, still oblivious to my presence. Carol studied the menu with that slight frown she reserved for things she found lacking in sophistication, while Dad glanced around appreciatively at the warm, rustic decor. From my vantage point, I could hear snippets of their conversation. "Surprisingly charming for this part of town," Carol was saying, her voice carrying that familiar condescending tone. Dad nodded, looking more relaxed than I'd seen him in years. The reviews online were excellent. Said the owner uses old family recipes. Well, let's hope it lives up to the hype. Carol set down her menu with the air of someone making a grand concession. "I'll try the quiche and salad. Nothing too heavy." The irony wasn't lost on me. Carol, who'd always made it clear my mom's cooking was too simple for her sophisticated palate, was now sitting in a restaurant built on those very recipes. Dad, who'd stood silently by while I was pushed out of my childhood home, was now paying premium prices for dishes he could have enjoyed for free if he'd just stood up for me. Rachel returned to take their order. Dad requested Mom's pot roast special, his favorite meal that Mom used to make for Sunday dinners. Carol ordered her quiche, with specific instructions about how the dressing should be served on the side. As Rachel headed to the kitchen with their order, Lily appeared at my side, slipping her hand into mine. "You okay?" she asked quietly, her eyes full of understanding. I'd told her they might show up eventually. Our restaurant had been featured in the local newspaper just last week. "Yeah," I said, surprising myself by how true it was. "Just strange." She squeezed my hand. "Want me to accidentally spill ice water in Carol's lap?" "I've been practicing my so sorry face." I laughed, tension breaking. Tempting, but no. I think I'm beyond petty revenge at this point. "So, what do you want to do?" Lily asked. "You could hide in the office until they leave, or I could handle them." I shook my head. "No hiding. Mom would want me to face this head on." 50 minutes later, Rachel approached the counter, a slight smirk playing at her lips. "Table 7 wants to compliment the chef on the apple pie. Says it reminds him of something his late wife used to make." Dad. Of course the pie would be what triggered his memory. Mom had won the county fair 3 years running with that recipe. "I'll take care of it," I told Rachel, straightening my chef's jacket. "Want backup?" Lily offered. "No, this one's all me." I took a deep breath and stepped out from behind the counter, crossing the dining room toward their table. They were both focused on their desserts. Mom's apple pie with cinnamon crust for Dad, and a lemon tart for Carol. Neither looked up as I approached. "I understand you wanted to speak with the chef." Dad glanced up, fork halfway to his mouth, and froze. The recognition in his eyes was immediate. Confusion, disbelief, then something like wonder. "Alex." Carol's head snapped up, her carefully maintained expression cracking as she registered who stood before them. Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again without producing sound. "Hello, Dad." "Carol." I kept my voice neutral, professional. "I hear you're enjoying the pie." Dad set down his fork with shaking hand. "This is your restaurant." I nodded. "Sarah's table. Named after Mom." "The pie," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "It tastes exactly like hers." "It should. It's her recipe. The pot roast, too." Dad's eyes filled with tears, surprising me. In the 3 years after Mom died, I'd rarely seen him show this much emotion. "It's incredible, son. She would be so proud." Carol had recovered enough to find her voice. But how? How did you manage all this? Her eyes darted around the bustling restaurant, taking in the success that was plainly evident. The last we heard, you were washing dishes somewhere. I couldn't help the smile that spread across my face. This moment, this exact moment of Carol realizing how completely wrong she'd been about me, was sweeter than any dessert on our menu. Remember that $50 you gave me for graduation, Carol? Best investment of your life. The confusion on her face was priceless. $50? What are you talking about? The graduation gift, the envelope with $50 that you handed me while Randy got his Mustang. Recognition dawned in her eyes. You can't possibly have started all this with $50. Not directly, no. But that $50 bought me a painting at a yard sale. A painting that turned out to be an authentic Jackson Pollock worth $55 million at auction. The color drained from Carol's face. Dad's jaw actually dropped like something from a cartoon. The absurdity of their expressions almost made me laugh out loud. You're joking, Carol whispered. Google it, I suggested. It made national news. Short order cook discovers lost Pollock masterpiece. That was me? Dad was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. $55 million? From a yard sale painting. Life has a funny way of balancing scales, I said, echoing Lily's words from months ago. Carol's expression shifted through a series of emotions. Disbelief, shock, calculation, and finally, an attempt at warmth that never quite reached her eyes. Alex, that's wonderful. We always knew you'd do well for yourself. Didn't we, dear? She nudged Dad, who seemed too stunned to respond. We should all get together soon. Catch up properly. I'm sure Randy would love to hear all about your success. The sudden pivot of faux familiarity was so predictable, it was almost disappointing. 3 years without a single call or text, but now that I had money, I was suddenly family again. Would you like more coffee? I asked, ignoring her transparent attempt at reconciliation. Or perhaps I could leave you a $50 tip for old time's sake? Carol flinched. Dad looked down at his plate, that familiar conflict avoidance posture taking over. Alex, he began, his voice unsteady. I know things ended badly. I should have. You should have stood up for me. I finished for him, keeping my voice low. You should have been my father instead of her husband. Dad's shoulders slumped further, the truth of my words hitting home. You're right. I was weak. I thought keeping the peace was more important than anything else. I was wrong. The simple admission caught me off guard. I'd expected defensiveness, excuses, not the straightforward acknowledgement of failure. Carol bristled beside him. Now wait just a minute. We gave you a home, provided for you after your mother. Don't. My voice was quiet but firm. Don't you dare bring Mom into this. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Around us, the restaurant continued its busy service, customers chatting and enjoying their meals, unaware of the family drama unfolding by the window. Finally, Dad looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed but clear. The restaurant is wonderful, Alex. Sarah would love it. He hesitated, then added, I'd like to come back sometime, if that's okay. The request was modest, tentative, almost humble, not a demand for forgiveness or an assumption of reconciliation, just a simple wish to visit the place that honored his first wife's memory. The door's always open, I said, surprised at myself with the response. The food's good. Mom's recipes deserve to be enjoyed. Carol started to say something, but Dad silenced her with a look, a small act of spine I hadn't seen from him in years. Thank you, he said simply. I nodded and stepped back. Enjoy the rest of your meal. It's on the house today. As I walked away, I heard Carol's hiss whisper, $55 million, Richard, and you let him walk away with $50. Back at the counter, Lily was waiting. How'd it go? Do I need to call my lawyer friend to bail you out for justifiable homicide? I laughed, the tension in my shoulders dissolving. No bloodshed. Just closure, maybe. And how does closure feel? I considered the question. like setting down a heavy backpack I didn't realize I was still carrying. She smiled, poetic and very healthy. I'm impressed. Over the next few months, Dad became a regular at the restaurant, usually coming alone for early dinners. Our conversations were brief at first, then gradually lengthened. He told me how he'd finally stood up to Carol, how he was seeing a therapist, how deeply he regretted the choices he'd made after Mom died. I didn't forgive him right away. Some wounds take time to heal, but there was something healing about watching him enjoy Mom's recipes, seeing his eyes light up with stories about her that he'd kept buried for too long. Carol never came back to Sarah's table. Randy did once, driving that same Mustang, now looking decidedly less impressive next to my modest but new SUV. He seemed genuinely happy for my success in his self-absorbed way. 3 years after opening our first location, Lily and I stood outside our newest Sarah's table, the fifth in what was becoming a successful regional chain. Each restaurant maintained the same core principles: Mom's recipes, comfortable atmosphere, fair prices, and staff who were treated like family. Think we should expand to the West Coast next year? Lily asked, her hand comfortably entwined with mine, her engagement ring catching the late afternoon sun. Maybe, I said, but let's not grow too fast. I don't want to lose what makes these places special. Planning our wedding had been surprisingly stress-free. Lily was as practical and down-to-earth about marriage as she was about everything else. No elaborate princess fantasies or bridezilla moments. Just two people who loved each other planning a celebration with the people who mattered most. The question of whether to invite Dad had been the only real point of contention. Not with Lily. She supported whatever decision I made. But within myself, in the end, I decided to include him. Not for his sake, but for Mom's. She had loved him once, enough to marry him and have a child with him. And despite everything, I knew she wouldn't want to hold on to bitterness forever. Carol wasn't invited. Some boundaries were meant to stay in place. The wedding was held in Marge's backyard, now beautifully landscaped but still cozy and personal. Marge, slightly stooped but as sharp-witted as ever, walked Lily down the aisle. Tom, now a close friend and business advisor, was my best man. Dad sat in the second row, next to Mike and his family. He didn't make a speech or try to insert himself into the spotlight. He simply showed up, hugged me with tears in his eyes, and told me Mom would be dancing in heaven today. It was enough. After the honeymoon, a month-long food tour through Italy and France that resulted in dozens of new recipe ideas, Lily and I returned to our comfortable routine. Mornings spent testing recipes, afternoons handling business matters, evenings enjoying our success with friends who become family. My YouTube channel had evolved into a full-fledged cooking show with production values that my early videos could never have imagined. But I always included clips from those first rough videos as a reminder where it all started. A cramped apartment, a cheap laptop camera, and a weird painting in the background that changed everything. Occasionally, people would ask if I regretted sharing the painting's value with Marge, giving up tens of millions I could have legally kept. The question always made me laugh. Money's just a tool, I'd explain. I have more than enough to do what I love with people I love. What would another 20 million add to that equation? Besides, Marge had done incredible things with her share, established a foundation for elderly people struggling with medical bills, funded art programs in underprivileged schools, created a scholarship for young chefs. The money had multiplied its impact through her generosity. One evening, as we closed up the flagship restaurant, Lily found me staring at the framed newspaper article about the Pollock painting that hung in my office. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asked, wrapping her arms around my waist. "Just thinking about how random life is," I said. If Carol hadn't been so dismissive with that $50 gift, if I hadn't needed something to improve my video background, if Harold hadn't grabbed that canvas from someone's trash decades ago, if you had been the kind of person who'd come forward instead of keeping the money for yourself, Lily added. Don't downplay the role your character played in all this. She was right, of course. The painting had been the catalyst, but every decision afterward had shaped where we ended up. Choices reveal character, and character determines destiny. Life had come full circle in the strangest way. Mom's recipes, once shared with me during quiet evenings in our kitchen, now brought comfort to thousands. The $50 meant to dismiss me had instead launched an unexpected journey to success. The family that had pushed me away had been replaced by one that pulled me close. Life isn't about what you have, Mom used to say. It's about what you give. Standing in the restaurant that bore her name, with the woman I loved by my side, and a future bright with possibilities ahead, I finally understood the full meaning of those words. I'd started with $50 and a box of recipes. Now I had millions, multiple restaurants, and a growing family of choice. But my richest possessions weren't in my bank account. They were in the legacy I was building, the joy I was spreading through food, the love I was fortunate enough to both give and receive. Carol's $50 had indeed been the investment of a lifetime, just not in a way either of us could have possibly imagined. The next morning, as I sketched ideas for our winter menu, I found myself thinking about that graduation day that now seemed like someone else's memory. The humiliation, the anger, the sense of being unwanted in my own home, all transformed by time and perspective into first step of an incredible journey. I picked up my phone and took a photo of the new menu draft to send to Lily. The cornerstone item was a cinnamon apple pie with a twist, a touch of cardamom that Mom had always wanted to try, but never got around to testing. I added a caption, "For all the roads not taken and the unexpected ones that led us here." Sometimes the smallest gifts open the biggest doors.